Good evening, everybody. It's me here, Paul Woodadge, again for WW2TV, and I haven't been as excited about a show for a long time. My first show of 2021, and it's a crossover show with WW2, but we're talking pop music, which is extraordinary. And I never thought I'd be doing this a year later, a year from when I started this. But joining me tonight from England live is Andy McCluskey from Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. Good evening, Andy.
Hey, Paul. How you doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. And yeah, I when I started this channel, I wanted to talk about battles and warfare, but also wanted to bring in what I call this crossover appeal. And it occurred to me that Enola Gay is really the only internationally known pop song that covers a major event in World War II. It's extraordinary. So, I mean, I was looking at the music from 1980. It was a year of I'm in the Mood for Dancing, the Nolan Sisters, DISCO, Captain Beaky, and then in October, November comes along a song about a bomber that dropped an atomic bomb on Japan. So I know you've told the story many times before, Andy, but just, you know, what was going through your mind that summer or the spring when you put pen to paper and you came up with that idea?
I have to go further back than that, way further back. I mean, essentially, Paul Humphreys from the band and I were geeks as kids and teenagers. He was into model railways and I was into model airplanes. I built just about every Airfix Second World War aeroplane model there was, except for a B-29 Super Fortress, strangely enough. And I had them all hanging from cottons from my bedroom ceiling. It was like the most ungodly dogfight you'd ever see, with Catalinas and Messerschmitts and all sorts of things you'd never see in the sky together. So I'd always been fascinated in Second World War aircraft. I was fascinated in a kind of horrified, morality questioning way about warfare itself, and the fact that you can, in warfare, you're encouraged to do things you'd be arrested for in peacetime. So all of this wove together my interest in airplanes, my fascination with the morality of warfare. So if you're interested in airplanes, and remember, I was only born 14 years after the Second World War ended, you come to the Enola Gay, the super fortress that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, because there's no other single aeroplane really that was more influential or more iconic in the Second World War. So that was the journey that really threw a long life path, really.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's interesting talking to you because it's just like talking to the military historians and people like Alan Murray, the comedian. We're all within about 10 years the same age. I'm a little bit younger than you, but some of my historian friends are about the same age. We all grew up with Commando comics and Airfix and war films on a Saturday afternoon because we all knew World War II veterans because they were our granddad, they were our great uncles. The guy who sold us our fish and chips was a bomber pilot, whatever it would be. So that understanding of World War II being there, but it does strike me what I know you said about the B-29, but you didn't go down the Dam Busters route or Battle of Britain or
No. I mean, I must admit, if you ask me to name my favorite Second World War airplane, it's a Lancaster, because you don't get better than the sound of four Merlin engines. Nothing sounds better than four Merlin engines. But I think it was just because the Enola Gay dropped that bomb. It was the politics, it was the morality. And also I'm quite fascinated by the fact that, you know, over the years, and you will know this as a historian, over the years, people bring their own agenda to the subject. And so you got all these different versions as to why the atom bomb was dropped and what were they trying to achieve. And, you know, the Russians had already entered the war, so why were the Americans trying to? I mean, to my mind, I mean, we're jumping way ahead now, but to my mind, the dropping of the atom bombs actually were essentially some of the first actions of the Cold War. It was the Americans demonstrating to the Russians what they could do. But we digress. Let's go back to 1945. It was just, I was fascinated by the whole story. I mean, this, of course, was the days before Google and Wikipedia. I had to go to the library and get out books and research. And I used to do this about songs. I was a geek even into the songwriting process. I would research my songs. I mean, I wrote 2 songs about Joan of Arc. It was like doing an essay. I was making notes and preparing it. And finally, I knew I wanted to write a song called Enola Gay, and in 1980, I was collecting the information from books and researching it, and I was sitting in Paul's house one day. He'd had to go and work carrying bricks at a local swimming pool for his to get his dole money. They wouldn't let him have the dole money unless he went and did a scheme. So I was on my own, and I just started writing this piece of music, and I thought, could this be the carrier for my lyric? And that's how it started. And it was, but I was really keen to try not to be too overt, too didactic. You know, you can't make a good song out of being completely journalistic. You have to weave it into metaphor and different imagery, to the point where an awful lot of people didn't at the time, and still don't know, that Enola Gay was about the aeroplane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima.
Yeah, well, my other half, Mag, who's French, I'm in Normandy, and it was a #1 in France, as it was in Italy and Switzerland, I think, as well. Had never, even though she's with a World War II historian, she's a tour guide herself, had never connected the dots herself. To her, it was a happy song you played at, you know, weddings and discos and things. And oh, that's what it's about. But to me, it's the ambiguity. The ambiguity of the song reflects the ambiguity of the event, because it was a tragic event, and yet it did bring about peace. And that's the ambiguity of your song. It's an upbeat song that you close your shows with. You close your shows with a song that is about something so destructive. And
yeah, I mean, it's a questionable moral stance that we end our shows on a euphoric, jolly song about, you know, 140,000 people being killed. I mean, Paul Tibbets, the pilot, until the day he died, was convinced that he'd done the right thing. I mean, killing that many people with one bomb is terrifying. I don't think I could sleep with the consequences or the thought in my mind. But, you know, the Americans considered that the Japanese started the Pacific War. They were drawn into it. They'd seen how horrendous it was, the Pacific campaign, and that the Japanese looked like they were going to fight to the death. So the Americans believed that they had to drop the bomb in order to force the Japanese to not basically stand and fight on the home islands. And it would lead to, they said, I think, 1 million GIs plus how many million Japanese, I don't know, it would have been. So he thought that what he did actually saved lives. There's other arguments that would contradict that, but the other strange thing, of course, is, you know, did they need to drop the second bomb? The argument is that they dropped a second one to prove they had more than one. You know, it's just, you don't know. You've got all these questions floating around, and then of course you come to the strangest part of it, which is you drop the world's first atom bomb in an aeroplane named after your lovely mum. That always struck me as being a bit strange. In fact, it was usually my get out defense clause when people said, why have you got such a happy song about, you know, that's twisted and weird. I went, not as twisted and weird as dropping the bomb from an airplane named after your mum.
Yeah, I mean, very true. And I've got some questions here, and already we're kind of going off script, which is absolutely fine. But, you know, I've done a lot of prep for this. It was fun prep doing for this show, but it seems to be universally classified as an anti-war song. And yet, I'm interested in your take on it. But to me, it's its ambiguity is what sets it apart. Because to me, an anti-war song ends up rooting it in the era it came, or any kind of protest song, you know, Free Nelson Mandela, whatever it would be. It ends up rooting it in that very era it was written in. Because your song is ambiguous, it has this eternal ongoing interest, because you're not stating anything, you're asking questions. It's all just, should it have done, and that. So when you read that it's an anti-war song, is that a fair reflection?
No, it was consciously ambiguous, and you know, you've gathered that from it. I wasn't sure. I was essentially laying out the facts in my own kind of metaphorical way. And I mean, obviously, it starts with, you know, you should have stayed at home yesterday, which sounds negative.
Yeah.
But I understand why the Americans would feel we have a weapon here that can save 1 million of our soldiers' lives. Look what it was like on Iwo Jima. Look what it was like trying to root out the Japanese and their foxholes. And it was just, it was grim. grim warfare. I mean, all warfare is grim, but this was, particularly brutal, nasty, flamethrowers and just incinerating people in the bunkers because they wouldn't surrender. And I think that, so the Americans really believed it was the right thing to do. I think arguably it was a Cold War act, but also you got to remember, I wrote this in 1980. I was 20 years old. This was 9 years before the Berlin Wall came down, which we never anticipated was going to happen in 1980. So it was a nuclear age. I grew up fearing that somebody was going to press the red button and we were going to go boom on this planet. And I think most people of my age did think that. So it was reflecting my concerns about the nuclear age that had happened consequently after the Hiroshima bombing. So it was a tapestry of feelings woven into it. I suppose, essentially, yes, do I think it was a lovely right thing to do? No. Was it the right thing to do in warfare? On balance, maybe it was. But, there's a lot of other arguments as well. So it was essentially ambivalent.
Well, I mean, the thing about warfare is that we like to have this ideal that there's a good option and a bad option. But in warfare, it's normally a shit option and an even more shit option. Or bad and less bad, and that's the thing. I mean, one of the famous things that historians say a lot is that the American military are still issuing the Purple Heart decorations they struck in 1945 for the anticipated casualties of invading Japan over land. So they had 200,000 roughly Japanese killed in Okinawa, and they predicted, as you said yourself, another however many hundreds of thousands going over Japan. So they struck however many tens of thousands of Purple Hearts. And if you know some in the American military today and they are wounded on service in Afghanistan, they are awarded the Purple Heart. That was struck in 1945 for that invasion. And they've got loads of them left. They're not going to run out. They're not going to need any more for a couple of decades. So that, whether that's correct prediction or not, is neither here nor there. But that is clearly what they were thinking in 1945 about how costly that event was going to be. But bringing it back to the song, because we're kind of going a bit heavy there, I don't know. Are you someone who labors over your lyrics a lot? Did it go through lots of rewrites? Was it kind of down on the fact packet, boom, done? Goes through sort of the process of coming up with it. And the classic line is "Mother proud of little boy to die." I mean, did that come to you in a flash, or was that did you labor over that?
I was very proud of that line. I thought that was terribly clever to get the mention of the pilot's mother and the bomb name as well, codename Little Boy. Yeah, I mean, as I said to you, I researched it. I was buying books. I was getting books out of the library. I still have my ring binder folder where I was writing all my notes out, and I can see some of the things that I'd written. But it was important to me, as I said earlier on, not to be, just lumpenly didactic and just say, Enola Gay was the aeroplane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. Was it good? Was it? It needed to have a lyrical feel. It needed to be a good tune. Nobody was going to listen to it if it wasn't a good tune. But certainly, no, I am a geek when it comes to my lyrics, particularly when I'm writing about a subject. One of the things that one of our raison d'etre when we started the band was that we didn't want to be a band that just wrote about, ooh, I love you, you love me, ooh, baby, we thought they were cliched lyrics. I mean, listen, love makes the world go round. Writing love songs is fine, but most people do it in what we just find to be terribly cliched lyrics. We wanted to write about things that we thought were personally interesting to us. We wrote about telephone boxes, oil refineries, French saints. It's just whatever fascinates us, we thought was a good thing to write about. And obviously Enola Gay fascinated me. And I researched the hell out of it. And I really wanted to make sure that I knew what I was saying, but also that I was saying it in a way that was also had a musical value as well as historically correct.
I mean, in my research, I was surprised that, depending on which figures you look at, Crying by Don McLean was the biggest seller of 1980, which is a classic breakup song, the cover of the Roy. I mean, how he could ever think he could beat Roy Orbison, I don't know. But anyway, it's just a classic breakup song, beautiful, but it's not terribly not much depth to it. It is what it is. It's a great song, but it's just crying, I've broken up. But, the thing that prompted me to want to speak to you is that when you wrote it, the hit, you were writing about history, but now your song is part of the examination of atomic warfare. And just today, I've been doing more prep. I can send it to you if you want, a curriculum from an American school system where they do a 3-part module about atomic warfare. And part of the lesson is they examine the lyrics of Enola Gay. That is part of the, now that couldn't have been anything the 19 and 20-year-old Andy and Paul were sitting in, bed sits and writing songs, that your lyrics would be used as a way of understanding that historic event. I mean, have you done that kind of Googling yourself and looked at the reaction to the song?
No, I haven't gone that deep into researching what's happened subsequently. I mean, obviously, the end of last year was quite strange because it was the 40th anniversary of the release of the single. And in August, it was the 75th anniversary of the actual dropping of the bomb. So that was a very strange moment to realize that the song was even older than the distance between the event and the release of the song when I released it 35 years and 40. So it's, I mean, I'm aware that it's been used for teaching purposes. I'm aware that it has been used in museums. It's been quite fascinating. I mean, it's woven into the fabric of my life now. I mean, a few years ago, we were asked to go and play in Dresden when they were celebrating the kind of final topping off with the golden thing on the top of the Semperoper in Dresden. Yep. And the Duke of Kent was there representing Britain, and it was a concord. It was a sort of making up for and shaking hands. And we had a song called Dresden, which was a metaphor for, and again, I use Dresden as a metaphor for a terrible event in my own life, which I think some people found more offensive than Enola Gay, actually. But we went to play a song called Dresden in Dresden, but we started with a giant screen behind us with the Enola Gay video that we play live, which had all the crew's names, and then a B-29 taking off. And it was quite strange knowing we were standing in front of a largely German audience, apart from the Duke of Kent and the Archbishop of Canterbury, playing a song which had a B-29 flying out above our heads. Obviously there weren't B-29s in the European theatre, but we were in Dresden, which was ferociously bombed in February it was 45, wasn't it? And again, there are huge questions about the morality and the reasons for the bombing of Dresden. Was that again the British and the Americans demonstrating to the Russians what they could do to back off? Did they really need to bomb Dresden the way they did? So those sort of things fascinate me in a horrified way and continue to do so. And yeah, I'm aware now that I'm 61 years old that my catalogue of things I've done, because we didn't write "Ooh Baby, I Love You" and crying songs, some of the stuff we've done resonates with people because it's about events and timely moments, but it's become timeless because it doesn't sit within a kind of genre of the musical time.
And that's the thing that it's what makes this the song eternal, is that it has got this way of bringing people an understanding. And I didn't know about your gig in Dresden, but I know you've played in Japan, as synth pop is big over there as well. And the fact is, whether you've considered it or not, is there's going to be some people whose first consideration of that event is going to be having looked and understood the lyrics of your song. There's other people who've never considered the lyrics of your song, which you're obviously aware of as well. But one of the things I try and do on my channel is I did a couple of shows about World War II comics, and my interest in World War II came from commando books. It didn't come initially from serious books. It went from comics that then took me to the serious books. And the fact is, there's going to be people around the world who first considered that event of the dropping of the bombs by your song, not through a textbook. And that has got to be fascinating. That has got to be something that is rewarding for you, but also a little bit of not guilt. I'm not putting emotions in your brain, but the fact that you're now part of an analysis of this event And yet it was just a pop song you wrote, you know, it was part of the second album, and it was a single, and yet now it's part of this larger debate. And you know, so it's I forgot what I was going to say now. I'm just so excited about doing this. But do you look at it now? You said yourself, you're 61 now, not 19, 20, you know. Would you write it differently now? Was there anything about it you changed? Have you gone out of love with that song? Has it always been one you've enjoyed playing?
I think that musically it works, and that was demonstrated at the time by the success of the sales. I think it was a great opportunity to demonstrate to people that you could actually write engaging popular music, and it didn't have to be about cliched subjects, that you could actually try to engage people in what I considered to be a more interesting and an in-depth way by writing about a subject like the Enola Gay dropping the atom bomb. And yeah, you know, I'm genuinely proud and moved by the fact that this song has, over its 40-year career, educated, drawn people in, maybe been a portal, a gateway to them learning more. And of course, you know, the other weird thing is that, you know, that for the first week of release, it was banned from Saturday morning kids TV in the UK because they thought it was our surreptitious way of encouraging people to be homosexual because of the use of the word gay, you know.
Yeah, I read that and I thought, where does that come from? I mean, that was so off it made no sense to me at all.
Well, we and our record company just had to put the BBC right and just say, it's about the aeroplane called Enola Gay. It's nothing to do with homosexuality. You know, it's just like jeepers, you know, it's they were so scared at the time.
But that's interesting in itself, in that 35 years after the event, that there are people in the BBC who didn't, when they read the words Enola Gay, think bomber. They thought something else. I mean, and now we're another 40 years on, and you know, we all know, we're not going to go into the lack of education of children about the past, but you know, we know there are kids who don't know about Dunkirk and they don't understand about D-Day and what have you, and it's part of the failing of the media, and partly it's the education system. But you know, in even 35 years after the war, that event was already beginning to fade away. Interesting as well, I found out about 1980 is the TV series in the States came out called Enola Gay with Patrick Duffy as Paul Tibbets and Billy Crystal.
Yeah, somebody from Dallas.
That came out afterwards. So if anything, they copied you.
I mean, it was weird actually, because a year or two after the release of the single, Paul and I were on a Universal Studios tour, and they actually had the mocked up fuselage that they use for that TV series, and we were like, oh my god, we had a photograph of ourselves taken against it. It's, you know, I suppose the reality is it was a single aeroplane, and people tend to remember that there was a bomb dropped on Hiroshima, not the name of the aeroplane that did it. Maybe because, I mean, maybe we remember the Dam Busters and Guy Gibson because there was a film made out of it that gets shown regularly, that it's become, at least up until maybe recently, I don't know, it's become part of the folklore of British history and on our view of, you know, the last time we considered ourselves successful and we still had an empire. It was in many respects, you know, I think a lot of British people think that, you know, that was the high watermark of Great Britain, and it's all gone downhill ever since. But so I think that, yeah, Enola Gay, it wasn't well known. Most people didn't know the name of the aeroplane, and I think actually our song has probably done more over the last 40 years for educating people to what was the name of the airplane that dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima. Because, you know, okay, I know it was the first bomb, but who remembers the plane that dropped the bomb on Nagasaki?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so it's I think the song has probably, you know, it has its place in educating and keeping that piece of history a little more alive than it would have been. And I'm proud of that. It's good.
In my research is that, you know, you Google, I've done various combinations of Enola Gay bomber, Enola Gay song, Enola Gay OMD. and it starts off converging. You get the kind of the history sites, and then you get the pop song, but then they all come back again. The amount of articles I've read where you're in the middle of a serious study about all these meetings between Truman and it goes, and of course this event was covered in the song, and they go, oh, go back to pop music again, and then the pop music articles then bring in history again, and so they are now twinned together. The event and your song are now in this. They're collected and tied together in a way that now can't be undone now. And that is inherently fascinating, and hence why I wanted to talk to you. So, I mean, over the years, you performed in Dresden. Have you had some weird experiences of maybe veterans coming up to you and talking, or people you're getting into, they are coming off a stage, you're sweaty, and you've ended up having a discussion about history there in the green room? Any sort of funny stories over the years?
I mean, I can remember us playing a concert in Waikiki in Hawaii back in the mid-'80s, and there were a lot of Pearl Harbor veterans who were collecting there to commemorate the Pearl Harbor, and we actually played in the ballroom of a hotel, and we got talking to these guys, and they were like, you guys are here, guess you don't know why we're here. And I'm like, yeah, we know why you're here. We know about the Second World War. We know the history. We wrote a song about one of your planes. And then so we got into a conversation with these guys, who were all wearing their naval hats with the various insignias of the various ships they were on. And so they were like, my God, a bunch of limeys wrote a song about the plane that dropped the bomb. Yeah, we've had a few. I mean, I must admit, I was anxious the first time we went to Japan as to how the song would be received. I was also anxious knowing that it was going to be in the 2012 London Olympics. And Danny Boyle actually was going to only use 13 seconds and then decided to use 27 seconds. And I actually started listening to the song, counting it, going, he's not going to start the lyric, is he? Because if the Japanese contingent hear the lyric, they're going to go, they might not want to compete, So there've been times when it's felt strange. And there are still times when I am singing it on stage at the end of a gig and the crowd are going nuts and they're all jumping up and down and it's quite euphoric and it's just treated as a pop song, the end of a concert. And it crosses my mind. It crosses my mind. I'm standing here in front of thousands of people who are all going nuts, having a good time. And this is about a fucking airplane that killed all those people. This is just weird. It does occasionally cross my mind, and I find it quite disturbing, actually. Sometimes there's nothing else I can say. I try not to let it cross my mind, because at that moment on stage, it's serving a different purpose.
Yeah, but that's the point. You're going back to this idea of it being ambiguous. It isn't actually about the destruction of. It's about a bomb crew. It's about a guy who's named the plane after his girlfriend, his wife, and that's the. You've said that in previous interviews. It's about the people, and that's one of the things I'm quick to defend is that it's okay to protest about a war, for example, but also appreciate what veterans do. And Paul Tibbets and his crew, they were doing a job. Now, regardless of what they thought about the policies and the nuclear program behind it and whether or not it should or shouldn't happen, they were still doing their duty. I had a cousin who was a Lancaster pilot who was shot down over Germany. Now, as you said, the bombing of Germany is a contentious thing, and Dresden and Cologne and what have you, and people bring up that Bomber Harris being a murderer. My cousin didn't have a choice. He was called up, put in the RAF. He could have gone to fighters. He went into bombers, and he did his job very well. And his job was taking bombers into Germany and dropping bombs that would have killed civilians.
They were just doing their job. They were in a war. They were obviously, they were being fed propaganda. They were fearful of, well, what happens if the others win? Well, they were doing all they believed they should do, which was the right thing to do. When you fight a war, you always have to believe it's right, because otherwise, how can you do these things? And I can remember, I grew up next door to an older gentleman who was the tail gunner in a Halifax and survived 2 full tours. How many of those managed to survive as a tail gunner in a bomber? They were always the ones that got picked off first. So it was just, you have to accept that these people believed they were doing the right thing, as did the Germans, as did the Japanese, as, you know, everybody. We all get fed the propaganda. We're all raised to be nationalistic and patriotic. And so you think, you know, I got to do the right thing.
And that's why I think the fact that you did it ambiguously is what made it so successful, and gives you the comfort to go on stage and performing it. You know, I mean, I wonder where people like John Lydon now, if he ever goes up and sings, you know, God Save the Queen, and it's whether there's a sense of, oh God, that meant something when I was 19, 20. Does it mean anything now? But you don't actually question. Well, you question the event, but you don't give an opinion on the event.
No, I left it ambiguous. And also it wasn't overtly critical. No. It wasn't overtly celebratory. And in actual fact, you know, I think one of the lines that's often overlooked, I think, summarizes what we're touching on here, which is, you know, the message that was sent: conditions normal and we're coming home. I was, you know, we dropped the bomb, we took the pictures of the mushroom cloud, we went, oh, that's, you know, yeah, conditions normal, we're coming home. That was all they were thinking about. They weren't thinking about what had happened down at Ground Zero. They were just doing their job. We executed our job, what we were trained to do. We're on our way home. Yeah,
and in a sense, as musicians, your job was to provide entertainment for people, and you did, and it's a great tune, and I enjoy it's always on my not that we have New Year's Eve parties this year, but it's on my playlist for New Year's Eve, and it always will be, I think, and I don't have a problem that I can dance and bop away to it slightly drunk, and then afterwards think, oh, hang on, it's about atomic war. That paradox, that confliction doesn't bother me. It's fine. That's okay. It's okay. It's like most of my historian friends who come on here and talk about serious stuff, you know, Professor Frank McDonough and Peter Caddick Adams, they can also sit and enjoy the Where Eagles Dare as well. It doesn't mean you can't just switch off and just, okay, it's Saturday night, I'm going to watch a silly, cheesy war film. Well, it doesn't matter. It's fine. It's okay to be both things. You can be serious about it and also have a good time. So anyway, so it's been really fascinating learning about the song. And you've, as you said, you know, Dresden, Joan of Arc, you've written about other historical subjects. I mean, just to bring it back up to date, what have OMD been doing recently, and I guess, and what are your plans for the future? Because it's a very different world, and what's going on next for you and Paul?
Well, obviously, we're waiting for COVID to be overcome. We all hoped it would have been earlier than this. Concerts are, by definition, mass gatherings, so we haven't had one since February the 15th. The only upside for us is that I've rediscovered the creative power of boredom, and there will be a new OMD album now because I've been writing songs. We hope to start touring next year. We're worried now that the early festivals in June still may be pushed back. We have a UK tour at the end of the year. We'll just have to see, but you know, we will ride it out. I think that, to be honest, we were more concerned about our crew members and the people who provide the technical equipment, because a lot of these people are self-employed, small businesses, and they haven't been able to benefit from the furlough schemes and the payments that the government has been making. So we actually were hoping in October to do a concert for our crew, and we were doing online and some people live in the Indigo O2 in London. And just before it happened, I got COVID. And then Liverpool went into tier 3, and we were told that really we shouldn't be coming down to London. So the whole thing got postponed. So we're, fingers crossed, at the end of March going to be doing this Yumi and OMD gig, which brilliantly, I have to say, all the people who bought tickets for the online and everything said, you're going to do it again. Keep the money. So actually, before Christmas, we were able to give our crew some extra money to help them through. That's the first thing we've got on our agenda we want to do, and then we'll see where it goes. And we continue to write strange songs about strange things. We have a track on the new album called Evolution of Species. Only OMD would try to write about Darwinian things.
You'll have all the creationists on your back with that one. All the
creationists,
the ARC people will all be on the
And then we've got another song called Anthropocene, because we're supposed to be living in that era now where human beings are going to be able to, in millions of years to come, when we're no longer here, people will be able to see our stain in the stratigraphy where we were and what we did to the planet. You know, I know it's First World War more than Second World War, but if you ever want to go back to the First World War and talk about dazzle ships, I'm your man.
Okay, well, I will put you over to my friends on History Hack. They have another podcast, Alex and Alina. They do the First World War stuff. I stick with World War II, but yeah, dazzle ships, amazing. I didn't see that ball coming my way. So yeah, amazing. So
we had an album called Dazzle Ships. So
of course, that's true. Yeah, I'd completely forgotten that one. But just to bring it back, you know, you said you were a geek back then. Are you still a geek? Do you still read World War II? Do you still read about history?
Yes, I do, and I still watch documentaries. And if any episode of The World at War ever comes up, you can't get me out of watching the TV.
Yeah.
The only thing that really bothers me is that, you know, 20 years ago, the history channels and the documentary channels on the satellite were history channels. Now, History Channel is mostly reality TV bollocks, you know, and I'm like, where's the real history gone, you know? I mean, I can remember before my mother passed away a few years ago, she had mild dementia, and she used to sit and watch Yesterday all day long, which I used to call the Hitler Channel, because I just thought, you know, and I just go in and I say, you're watching this again? Yeah, I said, you know, we won. She said, yes, I was there. And so I still watch an awful lot. You know, being 14 years after the war ended when I was born, the 60s, England and Britain were still living in the past. It was, you know, I would run around the playground, as you probably did, going daka 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 daka. And I remember when Battle of Britain film came out, you know, or we all went to see it at the pictures. We were hugely informed by the Second World War. It was very raw, very recent, and our parents had all lived through it. They'd lost people from their own family. They had stories to tell. It was very relevant and real to us. I guess now that, you know, so many of the veterans now have to be in their 90s by definition, we're losing them, you know, and it's people like yourself, and hopefully a little bit with my music and carrying on, keeping it alive, because you need to, people need to know the sacrifices in that war. Personally, I see the First World War as a horrendous final colonial mess where they just put innocent working class people through a mincemeat grinder.
Don't get me started. Yeah.
The Second World War, I would get down and kiss the feet of every single one of the people who went to stop Hitler and the Nazis. Thank the Lord they did. And I'm an atheist, and I even said thank the Lord. I
mean, what's so ironic for me is that my last show, I did a Star Wars World War II special. My last show, I was interviewing Mickey Ganich, a 101-year-old Pearl Harbor survivor, who was also at the end of the war on the atomic tests. He was there putting animals on ships to see what would happen to animals. And so he went through the whole thing. He was off Iwo Jima, Okinawa. And I nearly interview. I'm interviewing Andy next week. And I thought, no, he's not. I'm not going to go down that whole thing. But interesting that sums up what I'm trying to do. One week I'm talking to a 101-year-old survivor of the event. Next time I'm talking to a guy who wrote a song about the same event. But it's all access to history. It doesn't matter how you access the history, whether it's listening to a veteran talk or listening to the lyrics of a song. If it ignites some interest in understanding our past, then hopefully we can move away from having these horrific events in the future by learning from the past. You know,
if you forget your history, you're prone to redo the mistakes.
Yeah, as I always say, the only thing we've learned from history is the fact we haven't learned anything from history. It's this paradox, is that we just keep repeating the same mistakes. But anyway, it's been incredible talking to you, Andy. I will just end the show now, and I'll speak to you offline for a couple of seconds. For those watching, join me again tomorrow. I have got Lee Mandel joining me from the USA, talking about the American actor Sterling Hayden, who went from the OSS to working in Hollywood, ended up being shot in the face by Al Pacino in The Godfather. And the day after that, on Friday, we're talking about Audrey Hepburn in World War II, what she went through, the Battle of Arnhem, and her Nazi father, resistance mother. Incredible story there. But for those watching, don't forget, click subscribe, click the little bells so you get notifications. Check out our Patreon page. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, everybody. So I will see you all again tomorrow at One World War II TV. Thank you, Andy, for joining us. It's been great. And thanks for those watching. It's been brilliant. I'll say good night. I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Cheers.